Suck it, Judge. I have the Sanji cookbook. Ha 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 ha. To be fair, I don't think Judge ever actually tried any of Sanji's cooking because he would have seen it as a sign of weakness, obviously, but I don't know. Maybe there's some alternate reality out there for One Piece where Judge decided to taste Sanji's cooking and he's like, this is actually pretty good. And then maybe, I don't know, maybe that led to something different. I don't know. Maybe Sanji became the head chef for the Germa Kingdom or something and didn't go off to try to find the All Blue or to be with Zeph and the Straw Hats and all of that other stuff. Maybe he found his acceptance in the Germa Kingdom. I don't think so. Yeah, I don't think so. So, next up for the Germa Kingdom, or for the Vinsmoke family starting off, we have Vinsmoke Judge, or also known as Garuda, which is kind of like code name, how, Reiju is Poison Pink and the three boys have their own code names, and technically Sanji is Stealth Black, although he despises that concept, and went with Soba Mask instead, because, suck it, Judge. Judge is the king of the Germa Kingdom. He is also the supreme commander of the Germa Double Six, and he is, of course, also the patriarch of the Vinsmoke family. He is the, Sanji's biological father, along with the father of Reiju, Ichiji, Niji, and Yonji, and he is the husband or the widower of Sora. We also know that he used to be in the Mads group with Vegapunk and Caesar Clown and Queen and Buckingham Stussy and all of that, and that he was part of the research into the lineage factor and everything like that. And now post-Totland, given the fact that now Caesar Clown is with the Germa Double Six, him and Caesar have kind of reconnected and they're going to be making Neo-Mads instead, which I'll go into a little bit more near the end of this video. So, Judge is 56 years old. And technically, the earliest thing that we know about him beyond, he was born probably in the North Blue within the Germa Kingdom. It is probably assumed that he probably grew up with the concept drummed into him by his own father or possibly mother, since we don't know exactly, how everything worked out in regards to, since we don't know every single king or queen in between when they had the Germa Empire ruled over the North Blue for 66 days, and then when Judge is now king, since we don't know all of the details there. I would say there probably would be a couple of queens thrown in there, possibly. Getting into House of the Dragon territory with that one. We know that he probably just grew up within the boundaries of the Germa Kingdom. To be fair, we do not know, as I mentioned in the History of the Germa Kingdom video, we do not know when it became a mobile kingdom. My thought is that it was Judge that made it a mobile kingdom. And then, since then, that's just been the way that it is. Maybe, the rest of the Germa Kingdom was just, destroyed or something. Or maybe it's still there and Judge is just nah, I don't want to live there anymore. I want to live on the back of snails. And make them act like puzzle pieces. I don't know. That's about the most we have there in that regard. We know that during his younger years, he was part of course, the Vegapunk's Mads group that was, was sponsored by Dufel of the, of the underground, or of the underworld, and of course that kind of means Judge has connections to Dufel anyway, which could end up being, well, no, Dufel's dead now, but you get the idea. Given he was killed by Stussy, which is just funny now that we know the fact that Stussy is a clone of Buckingham Stussy, who used to be part of Mads, who was associated with Dufel. So, there's that. Wonder if, well, no, Stussy probably knows about that, but I don't know. We know that he was part of Neo-Mads alongside, as I said, with Caesar Clown and Queen and Vegapunk and Buckingham Stussy. During that time frame, they worked on discovering the lineage factor. And they each kind of had their own little specialties that they developed with. We know that eventually they ended up developing cloning because, well, obviously we know that Stussy was a successful clone. The fan theory is that, of course, that Weevil is a clone of Whitebeard, or an unsuccessful clone of Whitebeard. We know that later on, Judge, of course, implements his cloning techniques in regards to making all of his soldiers. So he probably okay, well, we've mastered that. We've made them successful, so I'm just going to use those to just mass produce soldiers, which, by a technicality, going off of the Star Wars logic of the Clone Wars, isn't necessarily a bad idea. Gives you a nearly endless supply of soldiers, although he doesn't treat them well, so it doesn't matter. We know, of course, that Queen studied different viruses. We know that Caesar ended up studying deadly weapons, like the gas weapons and stuff like that he kind of developed. And then, of course, the artificial devil fruits that he ended up kind of, for him at least, culminating in the smiles, and for Vegapunk has now culminated in the green blood. So we have those. And Judge seemed to also just work on developing weapons during this time frame, because I think in one of the cover pages for that series, where we're getting the Germa 66 story, where we get the backstory from ads, that we see that he's developing weapons during this time frame. We also know that him and Queen and Judge, or him and Queen and Caesar and stuff like that would argue a whole bunch and blame each other. And then, of course, not until 30 something years later, when they're in actuality, we weren't really competing against each other. We were competing against Vegapunk, so let's team up. I still kind of would like the idea of Queen showed back up and he was part of Neomads again. That would be kind of interesting. But we, as far as where Queen and King are still trapped in Wano, trapped in the prison, unless Green Bull just straight up killed them, but we don't know that yet. We know that at some point in time, probably, my thought is about 30 years ago, or 30 to 26 years ago or so, is when Mads broke up and Vegapunk went to go work for the world government. And Judge managed to escape during this time frame, and he ended up making his way back to the Germa Kingdom, where he was able to continue his research. Probably worked on getting, gathering up what he needed for these snails. The snails themselves may be clones of each other, and he just found one and mass produced them and started to set them up to be part of this mobile kingdom. During that time frame, he also ended up marrying Sora, and ended up having first Reiju, and then also having getting Sora pregnant again, and that resulted in, of course, Ichiji, Niji, Yonji, and Sanji. And, of course, Sanji was the failure. But we know that in that time frame, during the time frame when Sora was pregnant with the boys, that she despised the thought of Judge trying to take away their humanity, their emotions that he deemed useless, but she deemed as part of the emotions that help make them human. And she, of course, was very angry about this, and she thought that it would make them less than human, which, by a technicality, she's not wrong. I mean, as Inside Out and Inside Out 2 have shown us, your emotions are fully what help make you human and alive. And if you don't have all of those emotions running the way that they're supposed to be, sometimes you don't feel whole. And that leads to, depression and things like that. But, of course, Judge took away the ability for the boys to be depressed, because why would they ever need to be depressed? And of course, during this time frame, Sora ended up, drinking the poison in an attempt to try to reverse what happened. That made her very sick. She did end up still giving birth to the 4 boys. And of course, Sanji is, of course, the odd one out in the fact that he has his emotions. He has kindness and empathy and stuff like that. And of course, Judge doesn't like this. We know, of course, during this time frame that Sora becomes very sick and basically gets relegated to the hospital ward. And Judge probably doesn't go to see her beyond, I don't know, probably, I'm going to make a comparison here between Judge and Endeavor from My Hero Academia. Endeavor at least was able to admit that he did something wrong in regards to how he has treated Rey and how he treated all of his children. he was at least able to admit that he did something wrong, and at the moment is actually trying to, he knows he can't make amends for it, obviously, but he's trying to see what he can do to at least get somewhat closure in those relationships and try to make things better. Judge, on the other hand, since we don't know like all of Sora's lineage and backstory, and I'm going to go into some of those theories in the video where I talk about Sora, that there may have been something special about her, and that's why he never remarried. Also, as I said in the Germa history video, I made the comment that, like, I believe that the Sora Warrior of the Sea comic had been around for quite a while before Judge kind of, you know, was king and was working on his children and working on his grand schemes and everything like that. And the reason, and like some of the reasons why he ended up going down this route of having specifically, you know, 5 children, and giving them the powers that they did that kind of matched what the characters seemed to be able to do in the comic, was partially because it's making fun of his heritage, and he is very proud of being this descendant of the Vinsmoke family and being the king of the Germa kingdom, or at the time probably like the prince of the Germa kingdom, and then his, you know, his parent died and he took over. And, you know, he's like, screw it, you're making fun of my family, I'm just gonna, you know, you're making fun of my family and my heritage and blah, 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 and I'm just gonna turn my own children into weapons and make them match what's in these comics to prove you wrong, that I can do this even better and that I will use this to, you know, conquer the North Blue again. And that's just kind of my thought. It was just like, as I said, I was just like, I just have this picture in my head of like Queen and Caesar like reading in the newspaper the comic, and just like every time just like making fun of Judge about it and everything like that. As I said, I have a more in-depth explanation about that in the history of the Germa Kingdom video that I did. I talked about it at the end. But of course, you know, he doesn't really seem to have any other connection with Sora. He, as far as we're aware, he doesn't seem to go and visit her. I don't know if we ever see him seem sad when she eventually dies. We know that he, you know, berates Sanji over the fact that Sanji is sad that his mother died. Reiju is also sad that their mother died, obviously, and we don't know about how the other 3 boys felt about it, because we don't ever really see them interact with her. We just see, you know, Reiju and Sanji interact with her. But of course, Judge scolds Sanji for the fact that, you know, you're not supposed to have emotions, you're not supposed to have these weak emotions and everything like that, and why do you, you know, why are you sad about your mother's death? She's gone, get over it. You know, she's the reason you're a failure because she drank that poison, and now you don't have like the modifications that your brothers have and that your sister has and everything like that. And, you know, all of that stuff. And yeah, he gives her this very nice, you know, Judge gives her this very nice, you know, probably big state funeral and everything like that, and gives her the memorial and everything like that. But it's like, that's probably just for appearances, for the sake of the citizens of the Germa Kingdom, for all the clones that are there, and of course for all of the, you know, all the servants and other citizens that are not the clones, but still are part of the Germa Kingdom and possibly work for the Germa 66 in regards to like the scientists and stuff like that. Going into that, we do, of course, have it where he berates Sanji for cooking, and then eventually he ends up locking Sanji up in the dungeon after he, you know, does the whole, you know, fake Sanji's death type of a thing, and has, you know, the whole state funeral for Sanji and all of that stuff. And, of course, locks him up in the dungeon with the iron mask on his head to the point where, you know, Sanji only has it taken off when he can eat. And even then, it's more, Judge can't bring himself to kill Sanji because Sanji is still like his own blood and is still his own creation. But he still sees Sanji as a disappointment. And of course, when they finally end up getting to the point where they climb the red line and then head back into, you know, head into the East Blue to go to the, I believe it's the Kozia Kingdom that they are going to be invading. During that time frame, of course, Reiju helps Sanji escape, and they have to, of course, go get the keys for the Iron Mask, and Sanji kind of somewhat stands up to Judge, and Judge just is fine, leave, I don't care, just, you know, never use the Vinsmoke's name, never claim that you're from here, never claim any type of association with us, none of it, just, leave me and disappear. And to Sanji's credit, for like the next 10 years or so, he does like disappear from Judge's perspective, and such. And Sanji never wants to use the Vinsmoke name anyway, because he despises it, because the only two people in the family he ever cared about were his mother and his sister. Yeah, he probably initially cared about his brothers and his father, and of course he did want his father's approval initially, but later on that shifted because, of course, Judge was just a horrible father, and a horrible husband, and a horrible king. Good scientist, horrible at pretty much everything else. Well, he's a good scientist in the fact that he is good at science. He's a good at scientist. He is good at sciencing. He is bad that he does not care about the ethics behind it. That's the difference there. Although it would be interesting to see like where Judge ranks among like all the other scientists that we've seen in one place. Obviously, he's like leagues and leagues and leagues behind Vegapunk, but like where him and Queen and Judge and like even, you know, and Caesar, and like some of the other scientists and stuff like that we've seen in One Piece. Chopper can get thrown in there too. He is kind of a scientist. Some of the other marine scientists and stuff like that. See how they would all stack up against, like how Judge would stack up against them for like who's second place, type of a thing. And you know, so we see that. But, you know, Judge allows Sanji to leave, and then they go and they invade the Kozia Kingdom, and then really kind of the next thing that we end up hearing about them is that, you know, so many years later, so there's like a couple of things that happen here that I don't know if they ever get like fully, well, one of them does get like explained in the story, but I don't know if the other part was just like added somewhere in a Viva card or something, but it is supposedly explained that there is this alliance that is to be formed between the Big Mom, between the, you know, the Charlotte family and Judge and the Vinsmoke family, and that this is of course going to be marrying one of his precious children into her family, and he recommends Sanji during this time. Now, in like one of the other videos, I think it said that like they had been engaged for a very long time. But later on, it's just like, no, that doesn't seem to be the case. It seems that he approached Big Mom sometime after the Straw Hats started to have bounties out. Because when Sanji gets his first bounty from the Marines, of course, it's the horrible picture of him. But, like, Judge and the others would be like, well, his name's Sanji. And even with this being a horrible drawing, that's Sanji. And then of course they end up trying to go after Duval, which does, you know, that, you know, Duval ends up being fine because we know he's still around. We just saw him in one of the last chapters. Also the Straw Hats interact with him and everything like that. But we know that during like the 2-year time skip, Judge is probably looking for Sanji. And then the next inclination that we get with this is, of course, at the end of the Dressrosa arc, when the bounty posters are all updated, and Judge has influenced Sanji's bounty, made it 100 million, and has changed the conditions from dead or alive to only alive. And, you know, Sanji is just like, I don't understand, why is this way, when he ends up seeing it? Or I don't remember if Sanji actually ends up seeing that it's that, but I know that, like, Bartolomeo like points out to Luffy and Zoro and Robin and such that it's just like, yeah, that's weird that Sanji's bounty poster is that way. All of the rest of you are still dead or alive, but his is just only alive. And of course, we haven't seen that on any other bounty posters. There's the theory that like Bonnie's poster is the same way, simply just because they want her to be able to control Kuma. Also just, you know, Saturn's vindictive. In that regard, Saturn would also fall within like the science and everything like that in regards to like comparing him to like Judge and stuff like that. Although by a technicality, I would say Judge is a slightly more ethical scientist than Saturn is, but that's not saying much. Then again, Saturn would probably just look at Judge and his science and go, paltry. Amusing, but paltry. Leave me alone. Type of a thing. And Judge would just take that as a complete and utter insult. And then finally, we get to the point where we are actually introduced to Judge. And this is, of course, when Sanji has been brought to the Germa Kingdom and everything like that, as it has converged in Whole Cake Island and everything like that, and Judge and Sanji are reunited. Which, of course, leads to them trying to fight each other. And Sanji is not necessarily holding back. Judge is, of course, insulting him this entire time and is taunting him and all this other stuff. And, this is where we get the moment where, Sanji is showing off his abilities in regards to his armament hockey, and even observation hockey gets brought in here, showing off some of his Diablo Jambe techniques and everything like that. And Judge, realizing that these attacks can actually do harm to him, this also gives us a chance to kind of see what Judge is capable of. We see him fighting with his Garuda spear that he has and all this other stuff that he uses in his arsenal, including the hover shoes and everything like that. And we get this, there's this moment that really shows Judge's character is when Judge realizes that, Sanji's attack can actually do really big damage to me if I allow this attack to hit me. And that's when he has several of his soldiers jump in front of him and block the attack from Sanji, because Sanji is not just going to attack these random guys. And then Judge, of course, has no qualms with this and just stabs through them and then sends off this electrical energy at Sanji, which then sends Sanji, flying back. And during that time frame, it's more that basically shows us Judge's character. We also know that during this time frame, it's Judge is perfectly fine and willing to sacrifice his own men for his own goals here. He does not care. Even though later on we find out that they're clones, they're still alive. And as I made the comparison to Star Wars for the Clone Wars and everything like that, at least in the Clone Wars, at least on the side of the Jedi, they still see the clones as individuals, and they still mourn when the clones die. We see that during the Clone Wars saga and everything like that for the animated series and such. When Ahsoka or Anakin or Obi-Wan or some of the others lose some of the clones, particularly the ones that are closest to them, they do feel very sad about this because they still view them as living things. Judge does not. The three boys probably don't. Reiju, to a degree, probably does, but she's probably also just been kind of conditioned, and then she has to play the act of this, perfect daughter. In that regard, we of course have the moment where Judge is criticizing Sanji, and they're putting on the supposedly the exploding handcuffs on Sanji, the exploding bracelets that will for lack of a better word, go boom and blow off Sanji's hands, which of course are his livelihood and the fact that he is a chef, and that they will end that will happen if Sanji tries to leave. Reiju, of course, ends up explaining to Sanji later that, oh no, these aren't actually going to explode. They're actually duds. But I had to act like they're real for Dad. Also, during this time frame, I believe is when, or in this time frame, while Sanji is being, reunited with his family, as horrible as that is of course when Sanji sees the picture that is this painting that hangs in one of the rooms. It is the conquest of the four nations, which is calling back to when Judge fought and defeated these four kings in the North Blue, and had this portrait painted of that because he's weird and egotistical, which my thought is that either that happened before all of the kids were born, or while all of the kids were very young, or post everything else happening, or post Sanji leaving. But I mean, they have the power to climb the red line with the snail, so them climbing the red line again wouldn't be a surprise. And since they have that ability, it's one of those obstacles in regards to traversing the One Piece world is kind of a moot point, because they can just climb it with the snails. And as long as they're probably far enough away from Marijois, the Celestial Dragons may not care, and the world government may not care, particularly because at this point in time they are still associated with the world government. We also know that during this time frame is, of course, when they have the family dinner, and of course when, Sanji defends Cosette, and then everything happens there, and he gets beaten up by Niji and everything else. And then we have the moment where it is revealed to Sanji that, Zeph knows all, or that Judge knows all about Zeph and the Bharati and everything along those lines. And he's like, yeah, and if you don't cooperate and, go with the wedding and everything like that, then I'll just go and I'll kill Zeph anyway. I have, I can get rid of this, silly little cook in the East Blue very easily. I'm still pretty sure Zeph and the chefs would put up a fight, but, we get it. And, of course, from there is when we lead into when the Vinsmokes head out to go to the kind of pre-wedding dinner when, when Sanji and Pudding are supposed to meet. And, of course, during this time frame, on their way there, that is when they run into Luffy and Nami. And, Judge just kind of watches as, Sanji and Luffy fight. And, of course, we're aware that there's these, threats against Sanji and threats against the Straw Hats and threats against Zeph and everything like that at this point in time. And, of course, that doesn't mean that we, doesn't mean that it's, easy to forgive Sanji for what he does, because, of course, that's kind of the same thing that happens with Nami, is that it's not necessarily easy for her to forgive Sanji for, attacking their captain and all of this other stuff. And, fighting Luffy and, hurting him and everything like that. And, declaring that he's not coming back to the crew and all of that other stuff. And Judge just watches this, and he just kind of watches it with amusement, as do, the three boys. And Reiju just despises what she has to watch here, because she knows that, Luffy and Sanji are clearly very good friends, and that this is, tearing Sanji apart to do this, but Judge doesn't care. Then they get to the Whole Cake Chateau, where, of course, they are ushered in, and they are introduced to Big Mom and Pudding, and they sit and have their dinner. And, they're just, and then Sanji and Pudding go off and have, their own conversation. And then the rest of the family, accompanied by Big Mom, go down to the prisoner library, where she shows them, her prisoner books and her collection of, rare creatures stored in the books and everything like that. And Judge makes the stupid mistake of pointing out the fact of, yeah, I've seen lots of the other races here in Totland, but I haven't seen any giants. And she's just and she's just not happy that he pointed that out. And she just, makes up, I don't remember what she exactly says, but she says something to just, get Judge to shut up. And then after that, they have it that, they're all sent to their private rooms. Judge and the three boys are sent, to their own private, guest room area, and Reiju has her own separate one. And Judge and the three boys basically just end up having a version of, a bachelor party that night, where there's lots of drinking involved and lots of girls. And they're just I don't know. It's a weird scene. They're talking about just in a couple of hours, we'll be rid of Sanji, and then we'll be able to go and, have Big Mom's army help us, conquer the North Blue and, set us upon our rightful throne and everything like that, is Judge's opinion. And he doesn't care what happens to Sanji after all is said and done. He doesn't care that Sanji's basically going to be kept as a hostage. And all of that. And then we get into the next day for the wedding, and of course we see them all in their Germa royalty finest and everything like that, as they are heading to the wedding for the tea party, or heading to the tea party for the wedding. Judge really doesn't notice that Reiju kind of seems to be a little off during this time frame, because Reiju is the only one within the group that knows about, Sanji went and told her about, Pudding messing with her memory and what Pudding said. And she doesn't even know the full thing about the plan. She just wanted Sanji to leave with his friends to be safe. But, of course, Sanji can't do that, and I'll go more into that in, Reiju's video. The dog is snoring. And they get to the wedding, up in the tea party up on top of Whole Cake Chateau, which, as I stated, that would be a very fun party to go to, as long as you don't make Big Mom angry, or make one of her kids angry. And of course, Judge doesn't want to do that anyway. And, so, he sees, I think he talks to Morgan's for a little bit. And they have, and then there's, they're all just like conversing with like other members of the Charlotte family and stuff like that. And like he's seated and talking with Big Mom a little bit. And then they, of course, have the entrance for Pudding and Sanji when they arrive. And during the kerfuffle that is happening up on top of the cake with, Pudding not being able to shoot Sanji dodging the jelly bean and all this other stuff, basically what ends up happening is the Charlotte family that are all seated at the same table get candy coated by Perospero, and they're all just like trapped there because like he's as I stated, his devil fruit, he does a very good job of using his devil fruit. He's very creative with it, and he's probably trained quite a bit to be able to make the candy syrup this type of very hard to break hard shell candy that like they can't get out of, even like with their enhanced strength. And we have this moment, of course, where the rest of the family of the Vinsmoke family are all like trapped there, coated in candy and pinned, and Reiju is the only one that is like accepting of, so Judge starts to break down because he's like, all of my plans are falling apart, and why did you lie to me, and why are you going to shoot us and everything like that, and like, blah, 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 why did I fall for this trap and everything like that, and he's just like bawling his eyes out. And he looks over at his sons, and they're just like, yeah, whatever, we lost, ha 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 ha. We were the weaker ones, we fell into the trap, fine, whatever. And like they're not sad or scared or anything like that. And Reiju is just like accepting of her fate in this regard, because her opinion is, of course, that with everything that they've done, with all the blood that is on their hands from all the wars they've been a part of and the assassinations they've been a part of and everything like that, all the suffering that they've caused, she's fine with what's happening. And she just, she's like, she doesn't necessarily want to die, but she's like, if it gets my fathers and brothers out of the world, then I'll go too. That self-sacrificing thing. And, so there's that moment that happens, but, and like the boys are just like taunting their father for the fact of like, he's crying and he's scared, which are, weak emotions, even though he hasn't, shown any of those types of emotions. And then, of course, that's when Sanji shows up and Diablo Jambe's whatever and destroys all of the different candy coating that's around the table, and that's on them. And Nami and Carrot and Chopper all pop out, and they put, the earplugs in their ears while Big Mom is screaming, and they return their raid suits and everything like that. And now they're all able to help fight, and of course, we get the transformation sequence and everything like that. And then, there is this moment here. I believe this is where one of the confrontation moments happens between Sanji and Judge, which we kind of get a couple of these because we get another one later on inside of Beiji's castle, but Sanji is just like, he's confronting Judge, and he's just like, something along the lines of, Judge like asks him, why couldn't you just let us die? And he's just like, I can't. Even with everything, with the way you've treated me, I still can't bring myself to like let you die. And he responds, that saying that you're not, that you're not my real father, and that the only one within this group that I even vaguely consider family is Reiju. I don't care what happens to the rest of you, but that doesn't mean that I can bring myself to allow you to just die here when I have the ability to save you. And then, of course, that just leads into where, the Vinsmokes are helping fight against the Charlottes and everything else while everything is going down. And there is this, I'm trying to remember what order this happens in, because we know that Judge does go and try to, like, confront Big Mom after she's come out of her screaming phase and everything. He goes and tries to attack her, and she just like strikes him down with like, I think Zeus and Napoleon or whatever working together, and like is able to take Judge down fairly quickly. He still gets pretty damaged and he gets back up, but he's kind of not exactly all that useful at the moment. And I don't remember the exact order of this, but then I do know that they end up all inside of Beiji's castle form, inside of the Big Father form. And Judge and Sanji have this like confrontation again, and Judge is just like, he like swallows his pride because he's thinking like, well, they all have to escape one way or the other, and if they're not able to escape, then they're all just going to die anyway. And, you know, he'd rather go out fighting, I guess. And Judge is just like, fine. My children and I will go out and ask to act as decoys / bodyguards while Caesar tries to escape with Beiji and the rest of you inside of him so we can get out of here. And they head out. Judge goes, and Reiju and the boys all head out. And they all are, you know, fighting against the various members of the Charlotte family. And at some point during this time frame, Judge gets very badly hurt. And of course, this is, you know, the Tamate Bako blows up and the castle falls. And they are able to escape. And Niji and Yonji are like carrying an unconscious Judge to safety. And that's like the last we see of them for a while. We know that the rest of the that the three siblings, or the four siblings, show up at you know, the Germa kingdom itself, you know, the mobile kingdom, and are able to defeat Big Mom's forces that are there to get back the kingdom. But the next time that we see Judge is after when Sanji and, you know, Luffy are leaving Cacao Island after, you know, they delivered the cake and Sanji had to go back and save Luffy and everything like that after he came out of the mirror world. And, you know, as they're leaving, you know, they kind of sail by the fleet and we see Judge, and he's got like part of his face all bandaged up and like one of his eyes is covered and all of that. And whether or not that means we're going to see him with an eye patch or not is a little bit left up for debate, but I don't really care. Well, he wouldn't be the eye patch pirate because the Germa aren't really pirates. They're assassins for hire, which is a different thing. And they're not necessarily bounty hunters, but I don't think that's what's going to happen. Besides, with all of the tech that the Germa have, I'm sure they can come up with like a prosthetic eye for Judge or something. But the last time we see Judge in this setup is, you know, the Thousand Sunniest sailing by, and they're, you know, as Judge and the Germa engage Smoothie's fleet, they're leaving, and like Judge is yelling all of this, like what he feels is vitriol at Sanji, and Luffy's just like, why does your dad keep saying all those nice things about you? You know, it's like he's just listing off your good qualities. Why is he doing that? And why does he seem angry about it? And like that's like the last bit that Sanji saw his dad, is like them leaving in that regard. So that way the Straw Hats have the ability to escape, because of course Judge doesn't want to feel like he owes the Straw Hats anything, or owes Sanji anything by, you know, since they saved him and saved his children. He doesn't want to feel indebted to them. Then we cut into the Germa Six's an emotionless excursion. And so what we find out here is, of course, that Niji and Yonji got captured by the Big Mom pirates back on Whole Cake Island, and are going to be taken back to Whole Cake Island from Cacao Island, and that Reiju and Ichiji are going to go and retrieve them. They have managed to escape the Big Mom territory, but now those two are going to go back to try to save their brothers, which is admirable. Something this is a side note thing, and something I'll probably bring up when I talk about the boys in their own video, is the fact of not exactly like them overriding this programming from Judge where they can actually maybe start having emotions, but maybe something along those lines. I doubt it, but maybe something there. And we know that they come back because they're, they return after they get the other two, and then they return with Caesar, and they bring them all back to, like, Saint Germain is, like, the name of the castle, I think it is, and that's where they come back to. And then Judge and Caesar begin to argue, and, of course, that's when we get the whole flashback about Mads and everything there in that regard. And then at the end of it, they have this realization where they're like, maybe the real problem wasn't us trying to compete against each other. It was us trying to compete against Vegapunk when he was leagues and leagues ahead of us. So if we cooperate and if we, if we work with each other and everything like that, then and we form Neomads, then between, like, you know, your skills and my skills, we can surpass Vegapunk. And, like, that's their intention. And I think that's the last bit that we saw for, like, that cover story. It was just going, like, we'll form Neomads. And then I think we see, like, Reiju and Ichiji just, like, both walking off and sighing in the background as they leave. So, like, not again. In regards to their father's cockamamie schemes, Ichiji may be just, like, at his limit for, like, I am getting sick and tired of my dad's cockamamie schemes in this regard, and just leaves. And then, most recently, barring something popping up in the next chapter or two, before this goes out, which it shouldn't, well, it might, I don't know. But the last time that we saw Judge was, of course, during Vegapunk's message, when it is revealed to the world that Vegapunk is dead, and Judge and Caesar are just like, but we just teamed up so we could try to prove that we're better than him, and now he's dead. And he does this giant message to the world. How are we ever going to be able to top that? Boy, are they going to be really angry when they find out about Punk Records and and Vegapunk wanting to make it available to the entire world. How mad are they going to be about that? And barring us seeing something in, like, the next chapter or two, you know, with, like, the remnants of the message or something like that, with, like, us cutting back around the world to see some other things, barring seeing, like, Caesar and Judge being like, well, how are we supposed to top him now? Or, well, he's dead now, it doesn't matter, we're still gonna do this and work and blah, 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 and, you know, figure out something to do to be even better than Vegapunk or whatever. That type of a thing. I don't really know if we're going to end up seeing them again. I mean, like, yeah, they got the Neomads set up, kind of, like, started up. Like, they still got to go and get funding for it, obviously. And they can't get it from Dufel because he's dead. But, I mean, like, a Judge has a lot of his own funding because he has his own kingdom and everything. But it will be, like, I don't know exactly, because it's like, I can't picture Judge and Caesar trying to show up at, like, Laugh Tale to try to, you know, learn the history of the Void Century or anything like that. That doesn't seem like something that would interest them. Same thing with, like, I can't see them trying to go up against, like, the Marines or the world government, even though now they've been, you know, kicked out of the world government. I can't see them trying to go up against, like, the Celestial Dragons or something. As much as I want, like, Reiju at the very least to show back up, I can't see Judge being part of this. I had like, a theory that, like, or, like, something that I would have liked to have happened is, like, well, if Judge dies, then does that mean that Reiju is the queen because she's the firstborn? Or does that mean that it's Ichiji that is the king because he's the firstborn male? And then, even if so, like, would they show up because Reiju, because if she was queen, then she would try to do, like, reforms and everything. And if Ichiji was king, and I'll probably go over these a little bit more when I talk about them individually for Reiju in her own video, and then Ichiji with the other two, for, like, what they would do to, like, change the Germa kingdom to make it better. But then again, the boys might be a little bit more rudderless without their father there to guide them, since they're, I mean, yeah, they are capable of independent thought, but they're also programmed to be obedient to their father, and while Reiju has some of that same programming, she is able to defy it to a degree, as opposed to the boys, who are much, 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 much less able to defy it. But if Judge had died, then that would have been a different story, because, like, that, I guess that, like, handicap or limit block or something like that would have been on the boys isn't really there anymore. And we don't know if he ever set up, like, a backup feature of, like, oh, if I die, then this transfers to Reiju, or this transfers to Ichiji, or whatever. Whichever one of you can prove that you're the strongest, or whatever the case may be. But I don't know what we're going to see with Judge again. I mean, yeah, they got the Neomads, but, like, I don't know what else could come of that in regards to, like, Judge and Caesar. Like, I don't know what they're going to do. As I said, like, if Queen had managed to escape Wano, which I guess is still technically a possibility, but I don't know, that, you know, like, he could end up somehow finding his way to them, and they could all form, you know, Neomads, you know, together and kind of bring that back. Stussy, or Buckingham Stussy could get involved with that. I don't see Stussy trying to go and join them because she probably doesn't like them because she may have memories of them and they were just like horrible or something, treated her horribly or something. And Vegapunk may have been the only one that actually showed her compassion and everything like that. They may have just seen her. Given the way that Judge views the clones that he's made himself for the Germa 66, I don't think he would view, he wouldn't view Stussy as her own person. As her own, her own self as an individual and everything like that, because he doesn't see the clones he made that way. As far as we can tell, considering he's willing to sacrifice them as like a dime a dozen. So have no idea if we're going to see Judge and Caesar again beyond a little bit here, a little bit there, something post time, later on. I don't necessarily see them as being something that's going to show up and help the Straw Hats. Reiju, I could see something along those lines, but I don't know about the boys and Judge and everything like that, but I'll talk about those a little bit more in their videos. So that's what I have. The next one in this series will be about Sora, and that will be next week at the moment. That's what I have for watching. I thank you, and I hope you have a nice rest of your day. Bye!